So the ground rules when we start are that each of the speakers in this session will get about 8 minutes to say what they want to say. The target is to go for about 90 minutes. The upper limit is 2 hours. I'd like to be able to be loose with time. The moderator's job is not so much to be a timekeeper, but more to try to encourage more discussion. I'd like this to be a real workshop. Everybody has now recorded quite long talks, quite a bit longer than 8 minutes on the website. And I'd rather not sort of play the videos that are on the website. People can listen to those videos when they want to. One of the concerns I have with some of the videos, many of the videos, I'd say almost all of them, is that we tend to get into what I'll call inside baseball. I know I shouldn't use American sports terms, but I just did. What I'm worried about is that many people have thought very deeply for many years about many of these subjects. And I'd like to make this accessible to people who haven't thought so much about it. And I'm worried that much of the audience might not know, a lot of the people here are really quite, have done impressive stuff, but I'm not sure everyone in the community would know who's who and what's what. So if the speakers don't, if they're too shy to explain all of that, one of the roles of the moderator is to sort of step up and explain, why some of these people were invited, and also maybe if they use some term that or they make some background assumption that might be hard for the audience to follow, I'd like the moderators or the other speakers to sort of ask softball questions, another sports metaphor, to try to call out, to try to help the audience get up to speed on whatever the reference was. I think that these virtual things, they have opportunities to actually be better than physical workshops. So that the idea that we have no time limits on how long the talks are. And I can also see things like, which talks are getting which views. Hi, hi here.
Hi.
Yeah, welcome. All right. And so everybody has the ability to be heard by everyone. And so the moderator is not going to be controlling who can speak when. So please feel free to break in. This is like a little workshop. We want this to be virtual. We also have a chat window, so you can do chats, before, during, and after all the talks. Please, if anybody's stuck on anything, like if any speaker says something that is hard to understand or hard to follow because they're making a reference to something and people don't know, please ask please feel free to ask for clarifying questions in the chat, and then the moderator can break in and sort of explain that's that. The moderator should be more like an interviewer than the normal thing where they're just a timekeeper. I like the moderators to be asking lots of leading questions. But I don't want the talks to just be, one of the things we could do here is just to play the videos of the talks that are already on YouTube, or we have a site in China that's kind of like YouTube. It's called Bilibili. And anyway, I'd like people to go listen to those, but the 8-minute talks should try to explain, they should be more like a teaser to try to get people to go watch the longer talk. But also maybe to explain things that are not in the longer talks, like who's who and what's what, and what are the bigger issues. One of the themes that I tried to call out here is the past, present, and future. I really think we're most interested in the future, but the past is the easiest to discuss. And I also believe very strongly that the past is a good leading indicator of the future. One of the concerns I have is that, and I'd also like to do more outreach into some other areas. So I get to see something on the YouTube that we don't normally get to see for talks like this, I actually get to see how many views every YouTube video's got. And one of the things is kind of interesting is, can you all predict which talk by far has the most number of views at this point? And vote early, vote often. If you like a talk, go watch it a few times. But at any rate, John McCool's talk is by far the best, at least in terms of views. I also believe strongly in doing outreach into other communities that we don't always know so much about. And so one of the talks that I really encourage you to go look at that doesn't have so many views, but should have a lot of views, is John Massey's. Many of you may not know who John Massey is, but he was the force behind SPEC. And SPEC was the benchmark that was used, still is used, but used for many decades to measure the computers that we all used. And he has very strong views, not only about how to measure computers, but he has some insights about glue. And that if you're trying to get a consensus view across many, a portfolio of benchmarks, like they had in SPEC and like we have in glue, he believes very strongly that the arithmetic mean is not the best answer. And we're going to hear that, and you should listen to that, because I think that's an important point. Anyway, it did seem that many of the, maybe it's because of the emphasis on the past, but many of the people who know the past really well put a lot of effort into this, and I really appreciate that. Now, of course, what we're really interested in is the future. Where are we going to go from here? And one more thing about the past is that there was a lot of work on in experimental psychology in the 50s when my father was at Harvard in things like experimental design. And we're seeing some references to that again, stuff about validity and reliability. I think a lot of the things they knew in the 50s and a lot of the things that we reinvented in the 90s have been forgotten again, and they're important to know. So some of the things that John Massey has to say about SPEC, very relevant. At any rate, at this point, I think I'm going to hand it over to Valia to say a few words about the speakers or to introduce them. And I don't think we agreed on, so each of the speakers gets about 8 minutes to say what they want to say. And I'd like to start with that. I don't think we agreed on an order. And I'm not sure that all the speakers are on yet. But Valia, do you want to take it from here, or should we go straight to the speakers?
I think we should go straight to the speakers. And yes, we did not agree on an order. I can see the order was the order that we had envisaged. Yeah, yes. I think.
All right. Well, that would be fine. Although I don't know, is the first speaker is Nan here? I didn't see him on the list, but of course I might not only see one page of people now. There's 25 now. Who are you prepared to go for? Do you have a sort of 8 minutes or something that you'd like to talk about what you had? You and Jing? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you just fine.
Yeah. Oh, Jing and I prepared some slides about to define machine reading comprehension and the question answering.
That'd be great. I'd really love to hear that. And one of the things that I think you feel very strongly about is that in question answering, I think much of the community really views question answering as very much like squad, where the input is going to be a question and a very short document, say less than 512 tokens. And then the answer is going to be a substring of the document. And I think you have some thoughts about how we could come up with some tasks that are maybe a little more demanding than that.
Yeah. So, can I share the slide?
Yeah, please share.
Thank you.
I see it.
Yeah. Let me see. Let me see that, but I cannot see it now.
Oh, well, that's terrible. I see it wonderfully.
I also see. Now I see you again.
Okay. Oh, so you cannot see my slide now?
No. So I think maybe you should mirror your display so that everything's on the same.
Okay, let me try again.
So while she's setting up, there's been a question about just the bureaucracy here. We're going to have one Zoom room, which we're in now. There's also the website. I posted a link to it.
Oh,
It's a GitHub. All the slides are on there on the GitHub if you clone the GitHub, but also you can hear all the pre-recorded talks from there. So please go.
okay, thank you. As you know, Squad is the very famous MRC dataset. In this set, Squad defines the machine reading comprehension problem. In this dataset, the answers also is usually extracted from a passage. So the answer is usually a span. We don't need to generate or summarize. But in real applications, we need question answering. So, for example, we also released a dataset on Chinese machine reading comprehension. For example, for this question, do I have to have a do I have to have wisdom teeth removed? So yeah, this is a yes or no question. So it's a opinion question. It's not a fact related question. So the system need to generate an answer, not to select spam from the passage. This kind of questions or answers are also described in the Microsoft macro dataset. For example, how to get it. NYS text defined. So the system also needed to generate questions from the passage. So in real applications, both these two datasets are built from search. Our data is built from Baidu search, and the MS macro dataset is built from Bing search. So in real application, we found that sorry. Oh, we find that we need to extract question and answering from lot of documents, and not from from a single document like in a squad. Here are some examples. For example, in question answering in search, it usually contains the text-based question answering, table-based question answering, and video-based question answering, or also a knowledge graph question answering. This type of questions are classified according to their answer types. So, in question answering problem is a very broader definition. So we need to extract answers from different kinds of resources. So this is all I need to I want to say. Sometimes the users or some researchers focus on only on span selection on machine reading communication. So in real applications for question answering, there are many different kinds of questions or answers. So,
right. So
yeah.
So let me try to push back a little bit here. So one thing is that I think a lot of people might think that a yes/no question should be easier than a span selection question, because look, there's only, it's forced choice, just two choices. You get 50-50 right. But I can imagine that a yes/no question could be really hard. And that, unless you really understand the issues, you probably wouldn't do any better than 50%. Whereas the span selection questions, I think you can often answer them without understanding much of anything. So it's not obvious that a yes/no question is easier than a span selection question. You would agree with that, right?
Yeah, I think yes/no question is harder than a span selection. In our data set, we select from do reader. We select yes/no questions from the database and organize the shared task. Oh, Jing, can you say more for
right,
this?
so can you put a pointer
no?
in the chat, or can one of you put a pointer in the chat to do your reader? Because I don't think everyone knows about that.
Yeah. Yes. This kind of questions.
Right. But the question, what I'm
yeah.
saying is that this is actually a competition that you actually have evidence as to, like, what the, what sort of baseline performance is like on these questions, right? On a shared task. And so you have evidence that in fact, many people are doing better on the span selection than yes/no?
Yeah. So we need to summarize that users' opinions and then provide evidence for these kinds of questions. We also organize the shared task on this because it's very difficult for the system to generate such answers. Jing, you may add something for yes/no questions.
I am with Hua in the same room, so I will use her laptop to see.
Okay, but you're going to have to speak up.
Speak up.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay, so let me put more information here. We use the do reader data set to organize a shared task for 4 years in China. And in our shared task, we observed that actually the yes/no question or the opinion question is one of the most hard question type and because many of the systems that in the shared task didn't do well for such kind of question. And on another side, usually we even to well answer the yes no question or the opinion question, we need to do a lot of summarization on the passage part, because it's not an easy yes or no answer, but usually it depends on the condition. Usually it depends on the answer depends on some different conditions. So the real situation in the application is quite challenging and complex.
Okay.
That's
so
all.
One of the things you just mentioned there, I think is important. I'd like to elaborate. You mentioned the word opinion. So
Yes.
In Squad, I think the questions aren't a matter of opinion. They're sort of facts. That is, the question is asking about some statement, and you can go read the passage and extract the substring that answers that question, and it's quite, there's no opinion there. Can you explain what the difference is between an opinion and a fact, and how that applies to DU Reader?
Sorry, I didn't hear because maybe the connection is not well.
Oh, are people having trouble hearing me? So the question was that in Squad, there are no opinions. There are only really assertions. So that, the question is asking something, the answer, it's not an opinion. That the document makes a statement, the question's asking about some statement in the document, and the answer is extracted directly from there, and there's no matter of interpretation. Now, I gather that's different in DU Reader. Unlike Squad, you have both factual questions and opinion questions, and you also have yes/no questions and span questions. So you have all four possibilities. Can you explain a little bit about how the community has been doing over the competitions on these four cases?
Yes. So first, first let me clarify the creation of the different data set. So in Squad, the questions are basically created in a crowdsourcing way. The questions are created by the annotators according to the given passage. And in DU Reader, we collect the real question from the search log. So we have the more rich types of questions in DU Reader. And actually in the shared task, we design different subtasks for the yes, no, and opinion question. For example, for the yes, no question, for the factual yes, no question, we ask the system to predict the yes, no label for each question. And for the opinion question, we also ask the system to summarize the opinion from multiple documents, because different people have different opinions on one aspect of the scene. So we ask the system to summarize the different aspects. We ask the system to summarize the opinion of different aspects. Yeah, that's how we design. Yeah,
the task is different, but how do in the competition? What's sort of the state of the art, or how are people doing on these tasks?
Yeah, and basically, to be honest, we didn't observe too much surprising scene from the participants. So basically, people use. I think the most of the top system use leverage. First, they leverage the pre-trained language models, and the better system may use better data augmentation way. but we didn't see too much surprising or.
Okay. But if I was to compare the factual questions versus the opinions, are systems doing better on one case, or are they equally hard or equally easy?
No, according to our observation, opinion question is harder than the factual questions.
Right.
According to the performance of the different system.
Right. And can you give some rough numbers, like how much difference?
Sorry, I can't remember the number.
Okay, fine. All right, maybe you can put into the chat some background material that the audience might want to read about, to hear about DU Reader. But one more question about DU Reader. So in Squad, you're given both the question and the short passage to extract the question, to get the answer from. I gather in a realistic search engine, you just get the question, you don't get the document.
Yes.
And another issue is that some of the questions you've set up in DU Reader, some of them have a single document that answers it, and some I need to aggregate over. You were talking about the opinions I need to aggregate over, but there are also some factual questions where I need to aggregate as well. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
And does that make the task much harder? Are systems doing better on the cases where the answer is in one document than if the answer is needs to be aggregated across multiple documents?
Yes, actually the task was designed to ask the system to aggregate the information from different passages or documents. But we found that in the evaluation task, usually people still follow the format of Squad, and most of the system do the extraction from a single document. Yeah, but actually in the real production, in search, and we found that there are a lot of questions that requires the aggregation or extracting multiple answers from different documents. And and that's the most challenging part in the application. But in the shadow task, we found, as what I said, we found that most of the participants are following just the Squad format to extract the single answer from a single document. But I saw some papers published in ACL were trying to aggregate the different answers from different documents. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So one last question. I really like the idea of getting questions from real search logs as opposed to getting questions from, asking, Turkers to make up questions. And so I think that's a real important point. But one concern I would have is that suppose that what we want to do is to encourage users to ask questions that they don't normally think they can ask of search engines. Like, I would think that asking for people's opinions about something is a little different than normally we think about asking search engines for sort of content, like, facts that are out there, not so much, what's the aggregate view on, on this question that doesn't have a right answer, or something that really requires aggregating across many documents. We think of web searches, retrieve the document that has the answer to this question, not how do I do some kind of document aggregation in order to answer a question. So what I'm worried about is, my advisor back in graduate school said, people think about what they know how to think about. I'm not sure how to get from search logs questions of the kind that we don't get now, but we would like to get going. We'd like researchers to be able to answer. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yep.
All right. So there's a question from in the chat. Why don't you read the question, please? So
you're asking the person who posted the question to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could the person who posted the question please ask the question?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. So my question is, how difficult would be to answer a question when the answer is in a single document? But for example, to answer that, the information that you need in the document are in different paragraphs. Or for example, you are asking something like, how long does something last? And in the document, you have only the start and the end dates. And you, for example, the proper answer would be the difference. But the difference is not in the reference document. So how difficult would be those cases?
So Jin, do you have questions like that in DU Reader where I have to do some arithmetic in order to answer the question?
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's a good question. And actually in DU Reader, on the test side, we provide multiple ground truths for each question. So yeah, that's there.
And have you done any analysis to sort of say, are the systems doing better when a span works and when it doesn't?
No, I don't think I have the answer now.
Okay, but that's something that you could get from the logs you have?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to see a paper like that sometime, trying to summarize, where the state of the art is and what issues are easy and what is hard.
Yeah, but we do have some evidence that usually the system performs worse on the question that has on the question that require answer aggregation or the long answers, but the system performs relatively well on the questions that requires a short answer.
Okay.
Can you? Yeah.
So the long answer versus short answer was also in your paper. Can you say a little bit more about what that is?
We don't have that on the paper, but we do some analysis after the shared task. We analyze the results of the different participants, and we found the most challenging one. In terms of the answer lines, the system didn't do well on the long answers.
Right.
And, yeah.
But yes, no is an exception, right? So if the answer is really short, just yes or no, it's still hard.
Yeah. Yes. It's another dimension to measure the system performance, and we say that. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's really great. Are there any other questions from the floor? Should we move to another speaker? All right. So is Wu, did you want to say something?
No more. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right. Valia, do you want to take over here? So introduce the next.
Well, I've lost you. In the meantime, I've lost you twice. I have to say.
Isn't that special? All right. Yeah, but you're here now, so.
Well, I'm grateful that they're recording also. So we are. I have to say that I like this kind of interaction, and I think that it's again what you proposed is much more lively than than getting all the talks and getting the questions in the end. So I think we should go on, if I may say, like this. I would have liked to have Duan, Zhang, and Ming here, but is there any of those
Are they here?
people? I don't think
Okay.
so.
Oh, no, you're here. Okay, good. I see you now. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, great. Hi.
Hi.
So,
Hi.
hello. So would it be then, Ken, also, would we want to get this talk now?
Yeah, that would be great. So do you have a short presentation you want to give? Or
Okay, so maybe I can just share our slides. So I will pick up some.
So Wu, I think you have to stop sharing so the next person can share.
Oh,
yeah.
I cannot share.
Well,
Okay, now you can.
Yes, now I can. Let me try Zoom. Because in Microsoft, we usually use Teams.
Yes. All right, sorry about that.
Okay, so can you see the?
Yes, we see your slides just wonderfully.
Okay, okay. So hello, everyone. This is Duan speaking. I'm from Microsoft Research Asia. So so actually this talk is a joint talk. Including Zhang from Fudan University and Ming from currently so let me check the name of his new company.
You can say the name in Chinese, but it's Kaipuli's venture capital business, right?
Sinovation. Yes, innovation. Yeah.
So how's that said in Chinese?
Yeah, it's 创新工厂.
Okay.
创新工厂. Okay. So I think this workshop is really great. The reason is because actually I myself made some data sets in the past several years. So including some the benchmark data set for the multilingual NLP tasks. We call it the X group. So we also build a data set for the code intelligence community, which is called the Codex group. So we also built some data set for some Chinese open domain question answering tasks, and we released those data sets in a conference called NLP CC. I'm not sure whether all of you know that data set, but I actually did lots of data set efforts in the past years.
So, Nan, can I just interrupt a little bit? So the NLP-CC, that's like one of the two largest natural language conferences in China?
Yes,
right?
yes, you are right. You are right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
And I think the benchmark really can advance the development of the NLP research. But I don't want to say much about the advantages of the data sets, but I just want to express some feelings here, and some of them are just included in our presentation, including the three issues we listed here. The first is we think that most current benchmark data sets just lack of the robustness of measurement. So it means that if a model performs well on one benchmark data set, it doesn't mean it can always perform good when we change the inputs a little bit. Yeah, or we used some questions from other domains or other domains. So maybe the model will perform worse. And the second issue we think is I think some of the data sets have some bias from different perspectives. But I don't like to judge the data set built by others. So I just use the data set built by myself to illustrate this issue. So for example, so in the X group data set, actually, we also try to collect some instances from the real world scenarios. So we collect many labeled data sets from the production teams within Microsoft, including some question answering pairs from Bing search engine, and some query and add keyword pairs from the Microsoft Ads team, and some news classification data from the Microsoft News team. But I still want to say that the good thing is this data set are real, yeah, especially for the query ads matching and the QA matching. The queries come from the real users, just like Jing said for the Duan. Yeah, this is the same. But we also noticed that we have already carefully pre-processed and filtered the data set, but we think that there's still some bias. For example, for our QA data set, the distribution of question types is not balanced. So if a QA model can handle how question or what question well, then this model could have good results on our actual data set for the QA matching task. So this is the second issue. And the third issue we summarized in the slides is the metric, but I think this is not new to everyone here, so I don't want to put much time to illustrate this one. And actually, I think there's a fourth issue, but we didn't list that issue in the slides, which is, I think, maybe the most current evaluation benchmarks maybe with very strong constraints. For example, it's for the machine reading comprehension task. Usually, the model just gives a question and a passage, or sometimes our documents, and let the model to predict or extract the answer. But in real scenarios like a search engine, so when a user issues a query to like Bing or Google, so the search engine should try to find answers from the web index. So that is much harder. So there are many. There are some other factors also have the similar issue. So maybe we need to. So I think it's leads to the future part mentioned by Ken at the very beginning of this discussion. I think so maybe in the future we need to try to build a more fair evaluation platform where maybe we should relax the experimental constraints, or using the same or at least the similar training corpus and maybe similar hardwares, like the same number of GPUs. And so maybe that could be better. I don't know how to make the benchmark better. I cannot give the clear answer here, but I think we should do something. Yeah. So I think this is just this workshop aims to do. Yeah. And in this talk, the second half of this talk, and we also introduced some current progress to alleviate these three issues. Yeah, but we think that we still have lots of things to do in the future to deal with this three issues for the better benchmark development. Yeah, I think that maybe that's all I can.
So can I ask a question, which is in the title of your talk? Do you have the title slide here?
Yes, I have a title slide here.
Okay, good. So you didn't mention much about, are we reaching human parity? So what do you have to say about that question?
Yeah, personally, I think although there are some leaderboards, the people build some models, and these models can achieve the good results, and they can claim that the models are good enough to beat human on this task. But maybe sometimes, personally, it's just my personal opinion. So maybe sometimes I think it is a bit overclaimed. So for this question, so really reaching human parity, I think the answer is totally no.
Yeah. So Brian, I wonder if what's, like, I don't know that much about psychology, but I know that my father used to teach a course on experimental design. How would you think about designing an experiment to show whether whether a machine is better or worse than a person is at question answering? Is there a way to think about that question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about this work from, I'm trying to remember the fellow, isn't he, at Rutgers, who shows that, you get this human parity for part of comprehension, but then if you go to these complex sentences, what is his name? It begins with anyway, I'm sorry, right now I can't remember the name, but
you'll remember it and put it in.
Yeah, I'll remember it with 10 seconds, but there are places where you get human parity, and there are places where the machine catastrophically fails on certain types of sentences. So what it's showing to me is that the method that the machine is using to get to that parity is really quite different from what the human is using. Okay, so parity doesn't mean similarity. It means that you just got to that number. But in terms of, okay, I guess you're asking whether experimentally, but so that's within the data,
Yeah.
and within the
and I think that's a testable hypothesis, and it's probably already been tested. There's probably
I mean, that's what I say. There are these that's been tested, right? Yeah. So, but you're asking, how would I know whether?
How would you design an experiment, or how would you even talk about it in experimental psychology to try to address this question if I wanted to? And maybe I'm not.
I think
really
this adversarial thing, isn't that the fundamental thing where you come up with examples where the human does well and the machine does poorly. So I
so
just think
maybe the Turing test or something is kind of
it basically boils down to that. Yeah, I think so. You don't just randomly make up an experiment. You have to make up the experiment based on your diagnosis of what's going on with specific types of questions. I mean, I think that's what people are doing. So I don't think what a psychologist would do would be all that different from what people are doing in this, benchmarking machine.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, in the talk here, we heard the word robustness, but is like robustness and validity are sort of old terms, right, of art in psychology. But adversarial is a little different than robustness. Robustness
is the name, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But robustness is how I do against a random adversary, whereas adversarial is something.
That's a good point. Yeah. So to cover the territory is you would in a way want to know some kind of corpus search for what are the basic tasks being addressed. I mean, you're doing well on 90% of the cases that occur in the real world.
Right.
That would
be robustness, but an adversarial or Turing test is
adversarial where you're trying to diagnose specific failures. Yeah.
Right. So in sort of old psychology textbooks, are there a set of criteria like this, like reliability and validity?
Well, I see what you're saying in terms of, they were never comparing with machines in the old days.
No, just how do I design an experiment to know whether the conclusion's reliable?
Yeah, obviously general, the biggest one, is, the predictive validity, of course, but the generalizability. So can you take a new, test, retest reliability? So that's really absolutely basic in psychology for sure.
And that's what they mean by reliability. It's whether it
Well,
generalizes.
right. Well, now reliability can also be psychometric reliability of individual questions. So no, this is more validity. So they're talking about, there are 4 types of validity: content, predictive, and I can't remember them all, but
Sure.
The crucial one is, so early in the morning, I don't remember things like Linson and reliability, but the basic thing is, can you do it again? So replicability rather than reliability. Reliability is on the level of individual items.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that our field now is coming across things that are really discussed in basic, almost undergraduate textbooks.
No, I think there's a lot of approximation coming together here.
And the problem is, I don't think we're aware of what those courses are that we need to take. And that, maybe you could help us.
Well, certainly the generalizability, but psychologists have facing this problem with this whole thing called WEIRD, where they've been doing all these studies with people who are Western educated. WEIRD means basically college students in Ivy League universities or whatever. And they realize that as they then take these measures to diverse groups, they don't necessarily replicate. So that's more that's a robustness in psychology that people are really worried about.
Right. So there was a question in the chat,
There's some
which
hands
is,
too. Yeah.
do we care about human parity? And so one of the concerns that I have is our field historically has gone through booms and busts. And typically the booms are where there's lots of excitement about what we can do, and it leads to unrealistic expectations. And then we have an AI winter after that. And so right now, I'm seeing lots of blog entries out there that say that deep learning is better than people are at everything. Now, maybe they don't quite say that, but that's maybe what someone might take away from what they see. And one of the concerns I have is that makes it very difficult for us to do anything we can do, because we've already declared success on everything. Okay, and if we, the old upper bound used to be on many of these experiments, how well do people do? And it was expected the machines would come in somewhere below that. Now people are somehow expecting us to do way better than that. But I worry that when you find that a machine is, a metric says that the machine's doing better than the people, does it mean that the machine is better than people, or does it mean maybe that the metric is wrong?
Sam would call that saturation, I think. I'm not sure he has his hand up.
Yeah, I can't really tell about hands. I don't see that.
Oh, Sam and Mark have hands up.
Oh, so please speak up.
So we have questions.
I just wanted to make a very
Sam
simple
and
point.
Mark.
Okay, Mark, please.
I just want to make a very simple point, which is that most of these issues are extensively addressed by people who work on educational testing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where you're interested in scoring individual students. And so you need to worry about test-retest reliability. You need to worry about, are you really representing knowledge of algebra or knowledge of history or knowledge of computer science by the particular set of questions that you ask? Obviously, it relates to the question of psychometric norming of individual questions as well as sets of questions and so on. And I think there's a different set of issues that come up when you're doing experimental psychology and you're interested in evaluating a hypothesis about how the brain works or how certain people's brain works across individuals. But there's a different set when you want to know, does this person know more about X than that person?
Yeah, I think totally that's right, Mark. I know Dom Massaro used to argue that psychologists should be doing more psychometrics and less experimentation. But you know, definitely, I think that all that test theory is really relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to get up to speed on a bunch of related fields. I worry that we're sort of trying to reinvent all this by ourselves, but a lot of this has been thought about for a long time.
There's also all the work that people have done on polling and social science, survey design, and so on, which is also relevant.
Yeah, and you have a wonderful blog about whether people approve or disapprove of heterosexuals. Anyway, maybe you can point people to the URL with that, because that was really great. The point was that how you word the question will have a huge impact on the answer. Yeah. Sam, did you want to say something?
Sure. Yeah, it's the same question I posted. Yeah, this was a question about a specific point in the talk that I don't think was a major focus in the talk, but I think it bears on some of these arguments we're making more broadly, which is just kind of trying to figure out what the larger idea is behind the Win Grande results. So in the full talk, there was this sort of showing these embedding results from Win Grande, that if you crowdsource these examples for this common sense reasoning task, then Roberta's sort of sentence representations are really easily able to distinguish them. It can tell the difference between sort of a valid coreference and invalid coreference. And if I understood the talk correctly, it sounded like you were arguing this is evidence that the data set is biased. The data set isn't measuring what we want. And that kind of argument kind of worries me, because that it seems like there's a possibility either that the data set is biased, or that Roberta is good at the thing we're testing. And if we aren't trying to separate those two questions, then we'll always be able to dismiss the metrics that are showing that our current systems are working, which will then give us sort of a skewed sense of what our current systems can do. So I don't know, do you want to say more about just like what your take on Win Grande was, or where you're going with that argument?
Dan, that's a question for you, I think.
Me? I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you think my opinion is negative. I appreciate all the data set efforts, and I think they are valuable. And I think the human machine is also meaningful, because we need milestones to evaluate the models. Yeah. I don't know how to answer this question. Yeah, it's just a mixed feeling, you know. So I'm building data sets, I'm building models to try to beat the human parity on some data sets. But sometimes when we really did that, and I will also think, so whether we really move the our model further or forward. Yeah, it's I don't know how to express my feeling. It's just a mixed feeling. Yeah. I think all of these things are very meaningful and valuable. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm disagreeing with anything from the overall message of the talk. I think it was just this one point that I wasn't sure what direction you were arguing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So we're probably falling behind time here. So are there more questions for this talk, or should we move on? All right, why don't we try the next talk then?
From Brian. So Ken, and this
Yeah, so that would be Brian and Saturnino. Right.
Yeah, I hope Saturnino will go first if he's here. Make more sense.
Hi.
Okay. Hi. Yeah, I guess I could go first. So what I talked about in this maybe too long YouTube video I posted was the address challenge. And then Brian posted a video on the TalkBank itself. So the address challenge is an application of some of the data sets that are hosted in TalkBank, and Brian will wrap this up later. So I'll just talk again briefly about the address challenge. Address is Alzheimer's dementia recognition through spontaneous speech. And I don't know if I can share the screen or maybe I'll just talk.
Sure.
So what the goal of the task was to, well, it started when
I'm sorry, do you want to share your screen or don't you want to share your screen?
I guess we could share if
yeah. I think it should be fine to share now, I think.
Okay.
So where do I?
Oh,
I see.
Yeah, it's a little complicated. Zoom takes some getting used to. So while he's trying to put that up, the address challenge was about a dementia task, and it run it a couple of years. We participated at one point. There's been a lot of interest in this. Yeah, go on.
Okay. So somehow I shared the screen, but now I can't access my slides. I think I'll have to stop sharing again.
Okay.
I'll just.
You have to pick the right share, just the right app to share.
Okay, I'll try again. Yes, advanced, yes.
You get a lot of options, but choose the right one.
You get a lot of opportunities to do the wrong thing.
No, I can't see the. No, I think.
Okay. All right. You don't need to share.
Yeah. So stop sharing again. Yes. Okay. So this was a task that was in a way motivated by our reading of the literature, where we found that there's a lot of interest in detection of Alzheimer's dementia through speech and natural language methods. But we found that the field was very fragmented and it's very difficult to reproduce results that you find. And there's a scarcity of data sets that are suitable for this type of evaluation. So we found it difficult to compare approaches, and the address challenge was meant to progress in that direction. There's a number of reasons for wanting to do testing through speech, diagnosis being one of them, but by no means the most important one. Screening for clinical trials, characterization of the impairment itself. There are clinical motivations for it, and also if you're doing speech therapy, for example, characterization of the types of communication difficulties that arise, so you can design and evaluate interventions and so on. There's a lot of cognitive testing being done already through several tests, standardized tests, and the speech is a step in that direction. We find that if it were possible to gather speech, and speech is being ubiquitous, if you can monitor people over time, you might overcome some of the limitations of standardized testing, such as, the person might have slept badly the night before, and then the result is affected by that. And it's also an alternative to more costly and invasive tests, such as imaging, PET scan, CSF, blood tests, and so on. So this was the original idea. So we started by getting subsets of the dementia bank. In particular, we looked at the cookie theft test. I don't know if people are familiar with this. The cookie theft test is a test where people are given a picture, and they're asked to describe the picture using whatever words they want. The picture is slightly strange, so there's a number of kind of seemingly absurd events happening. So that generates interesting description. The speech is recorded. There's some speech from the interviewer, but not a lot. So it's not a dialogue, it's a monologue. And it's spontaneous in that sense. So it's people produce a spontaneous description of the scene. Lately, we've also added some speech from semantic fluency tasks, where people are asked to name objects or things of one category. So let's say animals or fruits or other things. So the initial task was that Ken's group participated in was using just the spontaneous speech. It was, I think, quite successful in that sense, in the sense that it brought together the community of people who had been working on this and maybe people who hadn't worked on this before. The results were quite interesting in terms of almost, well, the vast majority of studies submitted beat the baseline scores, which were not very high, but some of them beat by a lot, in the range of 90% accuracy in detection of Alzheimer's, and also in prediction of cognitive test scoring. It's important this is an important task as well. If this is meant as a kind of a replacement or a complement to cognitive testing scores, then the system should be able to predict these scores. And that worked fairly well. The challenge in a way we thought was more or less easy, because the distinctions between Alzheimer's patients in the dementia bank data set and the cognitively normal patients or cognitively normal participants are sometimes very, very large. So in a sense, it's kind of easy to detect. But prediction of MIMC scores is not so easy. There are other things as well that we didn't address. One of them is the pre-processing steps. So the participants were provided with transcripts, and the transcripts are time-stamped and annotated in the chat format at a very high level of detail. So that allowed participants to explore and exploit information that is not so easy to acquire automatically. So it would involve segmentation, it would involve diarization, it would involve several different types of feature extraction, which cannot at the moment be taken for granted. So diarization is still a research area, and especially in noisy spontaneous speech, as we have. And also the transcription itself, the speech recognition part of it. So this year we organized a new version of the task that had an enriched data set, a bit larger. One of the goals of the data set was to eliminate some biases that we've observed in a lot of experiments, where people had data sets were skewed towards older, the Alzheimer's patients were skewed towards older people and female people. And these are major risk factors in Alzheimer's. So in the end, some of these studies might be predicting whether a person is male and older, or female and older, sorry. So we balanced the initial data set, and in the second address challenge, we also did the same, but we balanced it in a slightly different way using propensity scores, so we could include more data, but making sure that no bias due to gender and age was involved. And again, we got a large number of submissions, about 30, 35 submissions. And some of these were accepted as papers for Interspeech 2021, and they will be presented there. In connection with this, we also organized a special issue, a joint special issue of Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience and Frontiers in Computer Science. And there are about 21 papers in this collection now, showing that the field's popular, and there's growing interest in this. And there's clinical interest. I'm based in a medical school, and I can tell that there is a lot of clinical interest from on the part of my psychiatrist colleagues. There are some challenges. So in a way, we contribute to addressing the lack of balanced standardized data sets, and we contribute somehow to addressing the reproducibility and methodological inconsistencies problems. There are many other challenges to be addressed for the future. One is the availability of data. We need more data in different settings, data from early on, preclinical populations, which is almost non-existing, and longitudinal data as well, so we can assess progression over time. So we did some of this in this year's address challenge. So there's a progression task. that addresses, that assesses impairment at baseline visit, and then 2 years later, we try to detect deterioration in cognitive performance. But there's a lot more that needs to be done in this area. There's very little longitudinal data, little longitudinal speech data. As I mentioned, there's the challenges in pre-processing, so segmentation, diarization, feature extraction, speech recognition in noisy conditions, rich annotation of the speech recognition. These are all questions that need to be addressed separately in their research challenges in the field. And also, last but not least, there is the certain disconnect between the studies themselves and the aims of these studies. For example, diagnosis of Alzheimer's in population, which are more or less well separated, against the actual needs for clinical practice and research. So there needs to be more involvement of groups doing Alzheimer's research and more involvement of people in clinical practice, so we can see what these systems could actually be used for in the field. I think I'll let Brian complement this with the part about TalkBank.
That's great. Brian, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Let's see. Share screen. PowerPoint. Share. Can you see that?
Yes,
see that?
okay. I see you. I see it wonderfully.
Okay, so yeah, I just totally, following up with all the details that Saturnino has presented. You really, just to emphasize that the difference between these challenges at interspeech for the 2 different years is that we move to more automatic processing, less handheld or handcrafted in the 2021. Okay, so I just want to make some, general remarks about, in a way, spoken language. Now, of course, ASR, automatic speech recognition, is spoken language, but in general, TalkBank is dealing with spoken language, whereas a lot of the other things we're talking about are looking at written language. So TalkBank is a largest open access. I mean, LDC, of course, has more data than we do, but in terms of totally open access, this is the largest open access database. It has 14 different fields. So we have dementia bank, aphasia bank, second language acquisition, child language, and so on. And in TalkBank, all the transcripts are linked, at least in the newer data, to audio or video, sort of on the sentence level. So the big thing really that characterizes TalkBank is that there's a single consistent transcript format, which then allows us to have programs that can, make use of that consistent transcript format, including a new database access system and so on. So, that's sort of where we're going with TalkBank. There's also been a lot of emphasis in the social sciences on these so-called fair and trust principles, which is, basically maintaining data so that people can replicate studies and, have complete metadata description. So that, that's kind of not relevant crucially for our talk here, although I guess it is in a way, trying to get the data that are going to be used in these benchmarking efforts to have, maximally good sort of data format. Okay. So we have had some benchmarking type challenges, obviously the address one, which Saturnino just described, but there was also the diehard challenge that Neville Ryan's paper talks about. And in that challenge, so we have these 16-hour-a-day recordings that are made in the home by the Alëna system, which, is $10,000 to buy a Alëna system. So not every researcher can do this. But, we are basically, Alëna also has software that diarizes the 16 hours, but, doesn't really do that accurate job. These are very noisy recordings in the home. So the challenge there has been to diarize them in a better way, try to get speaker identification. And there's been certainly, I think we've gotten to the point where the diehard, methods are better than the Alëna, but still they're pretty far away from really perfect scoring. One of the big problems there is sort of related to what Saturnino was saying, is that we need more label data. Now, we have enough data in terms of these recordings, but in order to really train the systems properly, we really have to label, mother talking, baby crying, when does the begin and the end of the baby crying, as opposed to a television coming on. So you really need to have really annotated data, which means you need people to do that. And so one of the things we're trying to do is set up a web system so that you can access these data, have students go in there and start to label data in a way sort of, you could talk about this as citizen science or crowdsourcing or whatever. Okay, so that's something that I think people want to continue with. And then there's the address challenge. And the number of labs that were involved in this address challenge just totally surprised me. We were really focusing on aphasia and we did a little bit with dementia, and suddenly everybody wants to predict dementia, and you can say, well, obviously it's because of social relevance. The rising number of cases of dementia around the world is really, really driving a lot of this. Okay, then the third project was in segmentation. Now that has never really been benchmarked, but there are a lot of training corpora. The idea there is to have some infant-directed speech from the parents, often with the child being 10 months old. So it's just really this child who's trying to break into the language code by finding out words in the speech stream, and there have been several different really architectures and approaches, but they really have not gone to benchmarks. So this is a great area where we really do need benchmarks to compare the different approaches on a consistent data set. So it's almost benchmarking in that there are these competitors, there is this data, but it hasn't really been pulled together. Okay, so I guess one of my points I've sort of already made is that TalkBank is not Trek. Trek has this great, I guess Ellen's on here, has this great ability to access the enormous amounts of written language of data that are available from the web. Whereas with spoken language, it's very painful. Everything has to be gathered with, microphones carefully placed and then, transcribed and entered and all the metadata added and everything. So, the amount of work that is needed for this type of data is huge. So all those different problems of saturation and bias and everything are certainly with us when we do these data, but right now we're trying to just get off the ground. So, and also the other problem we have is that it's not clear that there's a profit motive. Now, with the Alzheimer's, I think there apparently is, and this is enough to really drive interest. But, I don't know how many people care about child language segmentation. So anyway, some further areas that would love to have benchmarking, really for, people studying child language would love to have benchmarking of different methods for actually automatic acquisition of language from input. Mark Steedman did some work on this. There are others, of course, who have done this, but they're not really working on a consistent benchmark. And then, of course, ASR is, really the big, application to spoken language. But there you need, more data from children, from Alzheimer's, people with different dialects, and so on. And that's of course a different world. And then we would also like to have classifiers to assign clinical type. And there the problem is that even clinicians can't totally agree on clinical type. So the whole idea of a gold standard is a problem there. So when human judgments aren't totally consistent. We'd also like to understand whether, to predict the success of language therapy or even evaluate it. And also another area in child language is to evaluate the current level of development of a given child. Is a child falling behind because they have specific language impairment, or maybe children who are bilingual are being evaluated as having specific language impairment, where in fact they're just learning the second language. So there are some nice machine learning ways of approaching that. They're actually doing better than the sort of handcrafted ones from speech language pathologists. So these are just some areas I mentioned. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll turn back to you.
All right. So, you know, wow, you brought up a huge number of issues, both of you.
Too many.
Right. And I'm worried that we're falling behind time. So I think we're going to
Okay.
have to push ahead. But let me just call out, you mentioned Ellen's name at one point, and that was in connection to Trek.
Yeah.
And I think Ellen will probably tell us later what Trek is about. So if you don't know about Trek, you'll hear about that later. Another thing you mentioned was Neville and Die Hard and diarization. And I think we're going to hear about that one later too.
Yeah.
So
and implicitly, I mentioned Sam too.
Yes, right. And so I think we'll hear from Sam as well. I wish that we could have more conversation right now, but I fear that we've gone so slowly that we're probably going to have to speed up.
Okay.
But let's make sure that when those guys speak, when it is their turn to speak, that you make sure that they connect the dots to what you said here, because you surely made out a lot of dots. And if people don't know what all those things are about, well, please stay tuned or watch the videos that we have on the website, because much of that is there. This is all great stuff. One more thing I might want to call out is that the recording conditions on the address channel challenge are, I think, a real challenge. And that we found that having the transcript was a huge help, because the recording conditions were so bad that even a human listening to it couldn't transcribe it. I suspect that the transcribers got to listen to a better audio than we got. So anyway, that's just a little complaint. We should probably move on.